So I've got a canvas that I pre-toned. I took some red and some green acrylic and some titanium white gesso, kind of smeared all over it. It's got a lot of little textural areas, which I kind of like because I didn't use any water or anything. So I am choosing today to do a painting from the Santa Paula area, which is near Ventura. And I was happy to be doing a workshop in Santa Barbara. And was looking at scouting for locations and kind of just driving all over the place. Went through the Santa Paula on 126 Santa Paula Valley, and it's just very, very picturesque. It's agricultural. It's almost got a high desert kind of a look. And so this is what I ended up with. So I figured I'd do it. So here's what we're going to do. I like to start differently each time. Sometimes I draw, sometimes I sketch with a brush, sometimes with a piece of charcoal. Sometimes I don't even draw. This time I'm going to draw, and I just picked this up at the store. It's a Tombow pen, number 49. It's not a real. It's kind of a gray. It's water soluble. So if I put a mark on here, and I don't like it, I can take water and remove it. Immediate erase. But oil doesn't affect it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this kind of approximate sketch. I'm going to go down about the middle of the pages here. I have a little bit of a difference in format. So this is a little shorter. So we're going to go right down here. We're going to take this up just slightly off center. It's that hill. And it's all kind of aiming downhill a little bit. And then we've got hill there and little hill back here. I'm just kind of approximating it, knowing that I very possibly could be off and I may want to change it. Then there's a hill that kind of intersects about here. And it comes in and it works its way kind of down. And it dips about in here. Comes up a little bit. And then works its way kind of down. All right. Now, we've got one hill in front of the other. So let's kind of sketch that in there. Let's take this hill, put it out in front of the other hill. This hill is in front, and then we have an overlap. Some of this looks like it's been eroded and it's creating really nice textural and color characteristics. So we're going to kind of get that little area. So I kind of approximate where that is. It's going to be somewhere in here. And then this is a hollow that's eroded. We've got another area, which is quite of a sharp peak. And we've got this hill coming down right in here, and a lot of erosion down here. Kind of a cool color. Cool meaning blue. And we got our various trees. Before we get our various trees, heights of the trees, where are they? That's about, that first tree is about here. All right. And it comes over, blocks over into about that area right in there. Again, you don't try and draw the exact tree, because design-wise, you may want to change things. And not only that, as you paint, you may end up with a few characteristic strokes that you say, geez, I kind of like that. Really don't want to mess around with that. So we're going to come down right about in here with this part of the tree. We have another group right in here. Lower grouping of kind of shrubs or trees. And that looks to be about here, here. And then we've got almost a straight. And that straight is about here. All right. Works its way down. We're going to make this come down a little lower. We got another tree coming up right here, right about there. And it's about the same height. All right. And we've got a whole group of trees, and we're just going to kind of mass those in as kind of a below the hill. I may have to raise that hill a little bit. And you're going to design, meaning you're not going to stay exactly like it is. because it may not suit your taste. I'm going to leave a little piece of architecture on, a little bush right in here. Just more of a reminder. Some back in here, a little flyaway tree right up in here, one over in the corner. And then we got another little shrub in here. We've got the greenery. And then we've got the orange. And then we've got a railroad track, which is right about here. Some beautiful color nuances in this piece. All right, this is going to come up a little higher. This is going to come up a little higher. And we're going to start drawing, start painting. Because, again, what I've done is I've translated masses into line. So I'm going to start with a big, giant number 12, kind of a clumsy old filbert that's kind of been used and abused. So we're going to take a little bit of white, a little bit of Naples yellow, a little bit of ultramarine, because I want that sky to be very light, particularly this part. Got a little bit of yellow in it. I kind of like it. I threw a little bit of medium into it so that it'll go on easily, so I don't have to fight it. And I'm doing that for the expediency of the time frame that I'm working in. Got a big glob of paint right there I don't like. So we're going to bring that, comes down. It's a little blue sky peeking in right about in here. Bring a little bit more white back into that. One of the things that hopefully you notice when I do this kind of quick lay-in is, oh my God, excuse me, but I just dipped my brush in a red and didn't want to. Anyway, let me get back to what I was alluding to. Hopefully what you begin to notice is how quickly, this really has a lot to do with if you work on location, how quickly you want to get this lay-in done. And whenever I do any studio painting or quick study or plein air painting, those are basically the three types of painting that I do. Whenever I work on any one of those, every painting goes through 3 stages. The 3 stages are what I'm doing now, which is the lay-in stage. And that's what the lay-in stage is, getting everything covered. That usually takes a quarter of the time, ideally. In ones like this, it'll probably take a little longer because I have less time. But so we get the lay-in stage. We get a little blue sky in here, by the way. So we're going to throw a little bit more ultramarine into that same color and just keep it kind of pretty. Keep a little, yep, I thought I had it. This is probably a little too much, but let's do it anyway. It's not too much, son of a gun. Okay, so we're going to get this lay-in done. End up with the soft edges that I want. In the sky, I don't want anything too dominant. Initially, I do a lot of scumbling in the beginning just to get things in. Okay, so we got a little blue kind of working its way down. Maybe down in here, I see a little bit slightly fades in here. We just push this color back into that color. That way we don't end up with one solid color. Okay. So the next move is the mountains. Again, any of you that have watched me, and I'm not the, this is the only way to do it. I always paint from the back to the front. So a lot of people have said, oh, you mean you paint from top to bottom? Initially, I said no. And then when I really started thinking about it, I went, well, actually, yeah, because that's the way it is, top to bottom. So we're looking for value relationships. Color, too. But value, so this is absolutely darker than this, but this is nowhere near this or even this. Okay, so and it tends to be a little on the brown side. So I'm going to pick up my umber, and a little blue because I don't want it too brown, and it's got to be darker than the sky. These are kind of keys that, like I've said, you really want to hit that value. If you're off on your color, you know, you can live with that, believe it. But if you're off in your value, I don't care how beautiful your color is, it's not going to work. So let's see how this works. I think it might be a little on the too much on the red side myself, but let's, it's almost the same color as this. It's pretty close. It is a little too red. So what I do, I just throw a touch more ultramarine into it, and we'll start here. And then go up, bring it down, go down this side. Get this back mountain. They're all pretty much the same. There's nuances in there, color changes, but you don't want to spend your time right now working out all those nuances. If you do, when the hour and a half is up or whatever you're doing on location, all you're going to have is some kind of pretty cool looking mountains. And the rest of the piece will be pretty much incomplete. Throw a little more blue into it because as we're coming over, I'm seeing color changes, blues, and I'm seeing more golden colors. The goldens I will be using more ochre with, and the cools I'll be using more of the ultramarine with. Pretty simple, huh? It's just handy that this color ended up so close. I really had not planned it. You probably look at it and say, oh, he probably figured that out. No, I didn't. I toned this before I even knew what I was going to paint today. It just so happens. Every now and then that happens. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a complementary under painting and not have it be so close. But when it comes out kind of close, you can use that to your advantage too. I want to get this basic tones down relatively quickly, just so I can go back and start to get some. I'm going to go back now and add a little bit of that blue color into it. So same mountains, it's blue. It's now with that blue is a shadow, meaning it's coming from the sky. So the blue influence is literally, and it's slightly darker. Shadows are darker than the lights. So let's try this as my first try. I'm thinking, I don't like it. I want to go darker. A little bluer and a little darker. Mix my color again. Let's try it one more time right here. I like that better. Okay. And we're just going to follow the patterning that I begin to see. Now, every time I paint into this wet paint, I am diluting that color. So it means I constantly am remixing the basic color that I'm using. A little bit in here in this mountain. A little touch back here. A little touch over here. I just caught myself saying, a little touch. And up on the top right here.
Would you say you're a little bit lighter in value than the reference, just
maybe
to make it recede?
Yeah, I might be. It's a guesstimate right off the bat. I'd rather not be too contrast. If I'm going to make an error, I would rather that error be too light than too dark. Because if it's too dark, I'm going to have trouble with this. If it's not dark enough, I can always go back once I get this, and I always go back and punch some of the darker spots and use this because there are variations in that. It's not all one clean, flat color. A lot of little beautiful nuances. If I have time, I'll get as many of them in as I possibly can because it's just terrific. Nature offers all kinds of great stuff. It's up to us to realize it. And then as artists to use it. lighter touch, just barely touching it because I don't want to deposit a lot of paint. Now I'll pick up more paint and get a little stronger right here. And I'm diluting it, so I picked up a little bit of extra blue. And a little bluer over in here, but not anywhere near, just kind of fades. So what I want to do is push that into the color. So I'm not laying it on, I'm actually pushing it in. So I'm just kind of blending, so to speak. And then we get the darker, more pronounced right here. A little sneak of it right there, right here, a nice little touch. And right in here, it's really not blue. So I'm going to take the blue, I'm going to bring some ochre into it. And we're going to kind of fuzz this area in here, kind of in between, because it really is more in between. And a little bit down at the bottom here. Now there's some lights back in there too, everybody. And I haven't put those in. And I'm not going to till later. I've got enough of the structure down in my own estimation where it's holding together, and I feel like I can move on to other areas. So I pushed a little bit stronger blue right there. Okay. I don't want to overpick because I won't get into the other areas. But if I stand back, it works okay. All right. It's a nice mid-tone. It's not as dark, not as light. So it gives me, as I like to think of it, room. Now this hill is slightly lighter and more golden in front of it. So same brush, just add more ochre. And first thing I'm going to do is test it. Nope. Is that a little bit of Naples and more ochre, and I'll try it one more time. That's better. One more time. There we go. Try and not overpaint your lines, by the way. Overpaint the lines. Very important. Add a little bit lighter down here because I see the hills get a little lighter at this point. And I've got that lighter color mixed in. Just mix it back in with my other colors. Gets a little darker and dingier over here. So I just mixed in, I just pressed down and pulled some of the blue that I actually had sitting in the upper parts of the brush, put it in there. And there's some subtle darks right in here. So that goes back to the blue that I was using earlier. Put a little bit of activity. And this is, when it gets really, it doesn't relate, it does, but the amount of form is minimal. Sometimes when I'm working on location, I treat it more as activity. It's a lot of busyness happening in there. Maybe a little bit right here. Whoops, that's way too strong. We want it to sit. So I wipe my brush, and you say I just brush this right back in. Okay. So I haven't hit any lights back in here, but we're going to start in on some of these trees, these guys first. I'm not going to go all the way to the dark. I'm going to take my green, same brush, haven't cleaned the brush really thoroughly, a little bit of turf, a little green and umber, or in my case, asphaltum here. And plus whatever mixture I have in my brush, or my brush itself, which is probably, geez, that's not bad. I'm going to throw a touch of ochre into that, and we're going to start with this. Just gingerly. I'm really not pressing. I like that edge that I just got. And I don't want to paint all the edges the same. So sometimes you'll see my brush come down, sometimes over.
He wants to know, what do you mean about don't overpaint your lines?
No, I didn't say don't overpaint. Make sure and overpaint. If I said don't,
Oh, you mean paint over?
Yeah, cover your lines. You don't want everything to be outlined at the end.
So you're not staying within the lines.
Well, lines are approximate. This drawing is not 100% right on the money. So, I feel very comfortable because the lines that I put in initially are just approximations of where things go. The only time that would change sometimes is if I'm doing a studio painting, maybe a figurative piece, where more portrait oriented, where I really want to make sure I hold, and then I really try and cover my lines. I don't like, because in reality, yet there are styles where artists use lines. In realism, there are no lines.
Explain.
There, not as dark, because I've given myself room. Just want to show you. I'm going to grab a second brush here. Just want to show you how far away I am from going really dark. That's great. That's a really good relationship, light to shadow. Did I just compliment myself? Didn't mean to. Let's get this tree in. Now, the other thing that's really good is if you can keep a brush where you can kind of nurture in some of that you're going to carve in. So this is this hill that's back behind, which I probably went a little too far with the tree. So eventually I want to cut in like that. And this is where you paint positives and negatives. And you can really give the characteristics of some of these trees really nicely by doing that. So let me continue on with the rest of the trees, because I don't want to, and I brought this tree's too far over that way. So for me to be able to paint over those lines, I really need the mountains to kind of come into play there. Okay. And now I feel like I don't have to go as far. I always like to work from the mid-tones, be it color or be it value, out. Not my darkest darks, not my most colorful, not my lightest lights. So that I always have room to push. It's a safety valve. It's like, okay, I have room, I can push a little further, I can go a little bit stronger, but let's get that in there. Okay. Down, let's get all the way down to the base. I'm going to go a little darker down to the base. Brought a little bit of blue into it. Also, some of my lighter pigments are starting to work their way to the surface because I'm pressing a lot. Now we want to get this tree in. And I say I had it misplaced, in my opinion. So once again, that's that background hill. That's that kind of ochre. And if you're off a little bit in the color, I'm not going to tell anybody. And if you're off a little bit in the placement, doesn't matter. You're designing. You're designing something that you think works. So this is still the lay-in stage, and we're about 20 minutes into it. As I said, I'd like to be done at least at what we would call the 30-minute point with the lay-in. What that will give me is 2/3 of the time to be able to go back and really embellish. So one of the things I try to do is get as many of these edges in the lay-in to work for me. Because then I know I don't have to go back and fuss on every part of the painting. I can really put my time and energy into the areas that I believe are the most important. Darker. A little bit more green in it. It's a lot of interesting colors in these trees. And I will play with that, hopefully, as we move along towards what would be the finish, the refinement. I brought up the 3 stages. I didn't tell you all about them. Thought I'd keep you in suspense. Lay-in stage is what I'm doing right now. Then we have what I call the modeling and coloration stage. Modeling and super wonderful color variation, finding all those terrific nuances, pushing the darks, pushing your lights a little bit, and then the refinement stage. And that refinement stage is, in other words, I will use more of the time in the modeling stage, less of the time in the refinement stage, because hopefully a lot of my modeling will be somewhat refined. So I lightened this just a little bit, but a little yellow to it, I think. Oh, that's a stiff yellow. Probably should get a better yellow out. Actually, I don't use yellow too often, and I think I need to buy a good yellow because I just don't use it. And every now and then when I do use it, I've got this crummy yellow I grab. Because my go-to colors are ultramarine, the umber or asphaltum, Naples. So I don't want to go, I want this to be darker than that. So I still haven't pushed my darks as far as I go. We're going to take this over here, put a couple trees in, get the mass in, and it gets a little lighter, bring a little ochre into that color. And we'll just kind of, this tree kind of is a nice little tree that sits up, and I don't want to call too much attention to it. And there's another tree, and I'm moving it in more right about here. It goes off the page. We're just going to, okay.
Ben wants to know, what stage does hard edges come into play?
Refinement. Isn't that good? I answered that in one word. Refinement. That is a refinement stage. You don't want too many super hard edges right off the bat. It's easier to go back and make an edge really hard than it is to go back and, because you can overwork easier if you go back and soften. You can do it. I don't want to say it's impossible. It's just more difficult. So I'm taking ultramarine now. I'm taking a little alizarin. These are my darkest darks. And some green. And maybe
Laurel wants to know a question. What substrate do you prefer when you travel far away to plein air paint? Do you use oil painting canvas that you mount later?
Yes. Yep. I've got a pad right here. I'm going to pull it up. I take it off and see this? This is linen. I tone them, rip it off, take them separate, and mount them when I get home, if it's worth it. Generally, I have about a third of my mount. A third of them I think are worth it. Generally. Every now and then I do more, but I shock myself when I do more. And the other thing I found, sometimes I'll look at it a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 later, and I'll go, hey, that's good. I think I'll mount it. Your vision changes, your thoughts change, your idea of what's strong and what's, change. But generally, when I come back from a location painting trip, I kind of evaluate them all. I don't do anything immediately to them. And sometime a month, 2 months later, I may go in and decide what I want to do. I'm not a very good decision maker when it comes to that kind of stuff. I generally dislike my stuff more than I like my stuff. And I think I've got a feeling, maybe I'm wrong, but I've got a feeling most artists are in that same boat.
What about the drying time?
The drying time for travel? Generally, I use the solvent-free gel, and within a couple of days, unless I have painted with a knife and painted really thick, it dries pretty quick. I got it into a little bit too much refinement. So let's keep going with this. Pretty dark right in there. So I want to go almost as dark as I can. So I grab some green and some alizarin. Alizarin will really, really sink in and make it, look at that. And I can throw some ultramarine into it if it stays too red on me. But I can really get some nice, beautiful darks.
And then wants to know if you know how that pad of canvas compares to Frederick's brand. Are they similar?
Yeah. Yep. I've only used Centurion. I've used them for years. I forget who turned me on to it. Someone gave me, it might have been Kathleen Dunphy. Somebody gave me a Centurion. All of a sudden, I liked it so much, I started looking at it. And I've used other ones. I use Frederick's, but Centurion for plein air is a little bit less expensive. And since I told you, I'm not sure how much I like a lot of this stuff. It works great. I'm just, everybody, I know artists that have an affinity for, like I know a couple artists that only like to work on Clausen. Great. Then you should work on Clausen. You should try stuff until you find what you like, and then try new stuff, and you might like it too. That's something that I found. I try new stuff all the time. New mediums. I still say, I haven't done it yet with you guys, but I still told you, one of these weeks, I'm going to do a water-soluble oil 18 by 24, and I've never done one. So we're really going to have some fun watching me either crash and burn or pull something off that's halfway decent. And I don't mind crash and burn in front of you.
And what do you use to mount the canvas to a panel?
All kinds of things. There's people that use, I've been using Elmer's glue. But there are mediums that people use that are, what is it? I've heard people using Yes Glue. I've heard Hodgepodge. I haven't found an exact thing I like. I was talking to my, I can't remember what Brian told me, because a friend of mine, Brian Blood, mounts all this stuff, and told me what he uses, and I don't recall. And Brian, if you're listening, give me a call and tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Brian won't be listening.
He's out painting somewhere.
Yeah, he's out painting. Well, who knows? I don't know. Weather here is kind of gloomy today, man. Although sometimes you can get some of your best paintings when it's gloomy. So we're going to go in and, you know what? I don't want to do that yet. Why did I do that? Okay, let's go into the next level, which is this green, which is pretty close to what a color I had mixed up now that I look at it.
Do you have to separate the paintings when you pack them?
No, unless, the last couple I do. You put parchment down, and you might smudge a little bit, but generally, no. I mean, but I usually go, when we go for 14 days. So most of them are dry.
And the wet ones, you just leave them and carry them.
Yeah. It's a lot easier than you think. If you've done it a few times.
Oh, is it Miracle Muck? Is that what?
Miracle Muck is another one. I haven't used it. I haven't used it, but if it works, use it. I've talked to artists that have used so many different things. Some people said they've had trouble with it shrinking. Okay, we want to get kind of the feeling. Now I want to get that patch of kind of reddish orange, because it sets everything else off really nicely. So I'm just dragging my brush down here. And then there's a little rust area belt that comes in there. We'll get that in. I want to get this orange area in. So with one of my big brushes, I've got two of these number 12s that I'm using, and they're junk. They're not expensive brushes. I use my good brushes when I get into the refinement stage. So took ochre, a little bit of Naphthol red and some Naples yellow light. Let's see what that looks like. Close. Close. Just throwing a little bit more medium, paint's pretty stiff, and a little bit more ochre. Oh, that's better.
Linda missed what you said about using Elmer's glue and Mod Podge.
Well, here's what I do. I take the canvas. I got a bunch of canvases back there. If you want to grab one.
Canvas panel?
My lovely assistant is going to grab no, not canvas panel. Loose canvases from Venice or some of those back in there.
Oh.
Okay, so we got that orange in. Then right below it, one of the things I like design-wise, activity. Kind of bouncy, rolling stuff, and then graphic. I like the combination of those three elements really happening. So now we're going to put in the lighter color. And for that, I'm just going to use Naples, white, and maybe a little umber. Because it's real, it's quite light too. It's a lot lighter. I just glanced at it again. It's lighter than I thought. So it's probably closer to this. Probably even a little lighter. That's okay. Down below it, brown, and then there's an interruption of some shrubbery. And I kind of like that. That's one of the things I really like about this whole scene is these horizontals, the kind of vertical activity, and then the rolling soft hills behind it. You got a really beautiful combination of those three things. You got one of those? Okay. So this is just a piece of birch. You can use hardboard, birch, gator board. I'm just going to hold it up. This is a piece of birch that I have. Here is a painting I did in Venice. So what I do, this is too small. This is 11 by 14, doesn't matter. But I will take it and I will put the hodgepodge on this. Then I will lay this down, being hopefully the same size. And I will, from the middle, squeegee, very often with my hand, squeegee it out so it lays really flat. Once I know there's no air bubbles and the edges are down, I lay it down, and I actually I have a bunch of my art books that are heavy, and I lay books down on top. You just need to weight it down. I weight it down usually overnight, and next morning it's fine. Okay, let's get that bottom part in. It's not real hot. It's got a little bit of coolness. So it's brown, a little blue. That looks pretty good right there. I'm just going to say that's right. It's almost the same color as the board. Okay, so I've got my three colors. There's other things going on in there. We'll get to those. But now I have what I call my lay-in. It's covered. So let's go back and start on what I call the refinement. And I'm about 5 minutes off from where I would like to be. I'm going to take the greens. I'm going to start with the Naples, the sap green, and I know I've got a better yellow here. I'm going to see if this works better. Probably not. Nah, it's still pretty stiff. I don't know why these yellows are so stiff compared to some of my other colors. And I'm going to bring a little medium into it because it is so stiff. When your paint gets tremendously stiff, just use medium. Just any medium. And I have a little mixture of safflower and solvent-free gel liquid together. Okay, so I've got some kind of more acidy greens. That's a little too wet. Okay, I'm going to add a little white to it. A little lighter. Just kind of let your brush skip. If you let it skip, it won't feel, you'll actually capture a little bit more of the characteristic of what might be foliage. And just I break it up with some verticals, just a little bit. That helped. Okay, So now with the same kind of color, not quite as, I'm going to throw a little bit of blue into it because I don't want it quite as acidy of a green, but I still want it light. We're going to start finding the lights on these bushes. And it's probably a little lighter than I want to go. I usually like to sneak up on it 2 or 3 stages. And that's hitting the bright right away. So I added a lot more green to it. So what I'm doing, I'm looking right in here. And that's what you're going to be doing is as you're painting, you're isolating down. You're isolating. This is actually more difficult in plein air because there's so much around you. Sometimes it's very hard for you to kind of just stay focused. I usually find a point and you will use a landmark, and so I can always go back to that same spot. Stepping back just for a second. It's okay. It's not great. I'm going to add a little bit of umber to that color. I want to bring a little bit more warmth to it. Right in here, because it's a little darker, a little warmer. Right there. Just going to bring a little bit. Painting foliage is a matter of keeping a nice touch on your brush and not being too heavy-handed. And if you're having problem, I'll bet you 9 out of 10 times you're just being too heavy-handed. You just got to learn how to use a light touch. And just deposit the paint lightly. When you want to hammer something in there, feel free. Go ahead and hammer it in. But when you want the variation in the pressure you put on the brush will have a lot to do with the quality of the piece that you're actually ending up with. Okay, now there's this nice bush shrub right here. Right there. Not dark enough. That's where I'm good. This is where you're powering paint down. This is not a light touch by any stretch of the imagination. I'm powering the paint down because I want it to cover, and I want a little intermixing. If I get kind of a nice painterly look to my application, all the better. That's okay. As I just stood back. Now I see another little one, shrub, and this overlapping helps a lot. Right about here. Ooh, nice stroke. Bring a little more green into it. Maybe a little alizarin just to kind of ground it. It's getting a little overall green on me. So another one right about here. 1, 2, nice spacing. So I can use the spacing that's been provided. Again, overlap. We're overlapping it over this foliage. We'll leave it alone. Okay. Any darks? Right in here, I can see a dark part of a tree. I already got that one back there. There's a little piece of architecture. I don't think I'm going to put that in there, but I might. Depends upon time-wise, how I feel as we're moving. So now what I want to do is I'm going to move back into the mountains. So I want to spend my time finishing with the trees and a little bit of information up front. Oh, hang on. Before I do, I left one area out. This is kind of brownish rust colored. Like dead. I don't know if that's dead or not. It may just be the color. It's a little.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
Right, I had a question about,
It's a little too red right there. Go ahead. Ask.
keeps wondering about the edges of the trees where they meet the background, how to keep the transition so they don't stop the eye.
Keep a light touch on your brush when you put it in there. If you do a heavy-handed touch, what's going to happen is you're going to have a real pronounced edge. If you just use a light kind of, just let the brush, I've used this phrase, let the brush do the work, and I really mean it. I really mean it when it comes to stuff like that. Don't you try and overpower the brush. A heavy-handed will make it, the transition, just not very comfortable, so to speak. So that helps. And there's a little green above it. And I've got this green. I can come back here and tickle, just light touch once again. There, a little, not quite as light, but there's a little bit of. Need to get the light on this, didn't get that. Okay, leave it alone. Let's go back to the mountains. Got a number 8 this time. Instead of the big old clumsy brush, use an 8. We're going to try and be a little bit more refined now. I think first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to pick out some of the lighter colors. So for that, I'm going to use more Naples. Let's start right here. Pretty good. Throw a little more white into it. Maybe a little too strong here, but let's see. Now here's your problem right here, where that tree meets that. A little lighter. I'm not pushing. I thought I was pushing light enough. I'm not, amazingly. That's probably a little too light, but that's closer to what I think I need. And so I can bounce between one that's a little darker, one's a little bit lighter. As I step back, it's pretty good. And again, if I want to dwell on it and make it perfect, I could do that but I would be sacrificing a lot of the other parts of the painting, and I don't want to do that. So I have to say, is that good enough? Can I leave it? The answer is yeah. I'm going to come in here with a little bit of light. Now I've mixed this into this other color as I've been painting, so it's not going to be as light, and I don't want it as light. So this is where letting the colors mix together can actually begin to work for you. Stepping back, yeah, it's okay. See, I can only judge this thing honestly if I step back. That's why I try and tell you when I'm stepping back. And that's probably the biggest mistake most people make when they paint, particularly, I don't care if it's studio painting or plein air painting. The biggest mistake that I see is people don't step back often enough. I see it in class when people are working, and I see it on location when I'm doing a plein air. People want to sit there and they just do not want to get back. And that's one of the reasons that I stand a lot, particularly in the first stages of almost any painting, and always on location. And that reason is because then I can stand back. I mean, you can get up, you can be sitting and get up and stand back too. So don't get me wrong. That's another option always. A little bit more gold into it, and I'm going to go in right up here. And right there. Standing back. That looks a little too heavy. So So we'll take care of that in a second. I get some cooler, I'm going to add a little blue to that white color because I'm getting some interesting cooler colors right about in here. Don't like that. There we go. Let me mix that up a little bit more because it's, there we go. Well, that's a good, the value is so subtle. Right here. A little cooler right there. A little lighter. I just stepped back, wanted to see how it was shaping up. It's a little loud, in my opinion, meaning maybe a little too much value. I want to get that overlap right there. A little bit of light kind of working its way down here, then blending over. So a lot of really interesting subtleties back here. We want to make sure that the mountains stay back and they don't come forward because because you get too much contrast into them, because that's what will happen. You get too much contrast and they're going to start inching forward and they're going to take away from what really is more the trees. So that's reading pretty well. And we need a little bit of information here, not as much. And let's see if we can do it this way. Nope. Let's try it one more time. It's a little path. And it works its way down. And more branch off this way. I want to give it what's necessary. A little bit. I could probably get by leaving a lot of that alone, maybe a little bit more right in here. Show off the top of that hill. I need to get in there with those kind of cool colors. So there I'm going back to my blue and umber, but a lot of blue. And we're going to go right. Let's see. Well, that's about right. That might be a little too dark, actually. I'm going to get a little lavender. It's going a little green on me, so I throw a little alizarin into it. Alizarin blue. There we go. Let's try that. No, still not there. God, I hate to go for more than 2 or 3 tries on a quick painting. I can go back into a few of these a little bit darker, which is one of the questions you guys asked right at the beginning. Okay, put some of those lights in there if I can. Got a little brush, so I'm just going to grab it while it's handy. And we're going to go, and it's cool. The lights are not really hot. So I threw some blue into my lighter colors, maybe a little bit more. And we'll try this. Let's see what it looks like. Good enough. Okay, just stay back for a second. I want to see how it's shaping up okay. I need to clean up the top and then a nice bright light on the edge right here. And then over in here, kind of hit and miss. Go back to the darker color. So you put dark, you put light, you put dark, you put light. Much the same as when you paint a tree. You don't do one direction and then you're done. Sometimes you have to add lights, add dark, and sometimes you have to do it 20, 30 times to hit it. And then you clean up the top because we got a little bit clumsy with that. Nope, a little too much red. That's okay. A little path that works its way over there. A little bit, add a little more brown, a little darker, a little cooler. And we'll get and then down below, we want that mountain, we want this hillside to be in front. So we definitely want to come over it. Okay, it sits back there good enough. This is as much as we're going to get in a quickie. So let's, so we've got about 25, 35 minutes. So now I'm going to breathe a little bit. And we'll go back and do a little, whoops, what the heck? I don't know where that color came from. I'll bring this mountain in front. So I'm just going to blend that color in. A lot of times when you put some strokes back into it, even back in here, we can see it's a little lighter. So I'm going to take, lighten that area up just a little bit. Okay, let's go back to the trees. Again, that's what I've said to me is our star. And there's going to be some linear work in there too. But now I want to go back and punch some real darks into those trees. So I'm going to clean a brush just because I don't want all the residue. Let me take this brush, I like it better. I don't want all the residue of the lighter colors coming back up when I want to go really dark. So use a little turp. Now I'm going to take blue. I'm going to put it in a separate area. Ultramarine blue. I'm not going, so it's not mixed in the same areas that I've been. I'm going to take the asphaltum, a little bit of green, and a little bit of alizarin. The darkest colors I have on my palette. And we're going to start right in here.
So Laurel would like to know, when you make a stroke that creates a glare, what do you do? Just try a different direction?
Yeah. Well, if you're getting a glare, it's because your stroke goes this way, because light is always coming from the top. So when light comes from the top, it's going to hit those ridges. So if you stroke down more, you will avoid a lot of the glare. Not always, but you'll avoid a lot of it. And I really didn't know this for years. And I went to a couple demonstrations and I watched these guys paint portraits, and they'd have a brush like this. And then they'd really lightly just go and get rid of, just literally brush over. And it was to get rid of the glare. Interesting how that happens. So I'm looking for a little feeling of really vague tree holes right in here. Try and point to you so you kind of know what I'm looking at. What it means, I still have to come over with the trees, but I can get a nice feeling started. Okay, so let's go back with the dark. Nice dark color here. It is really dark too. Oof. And then I'm going to come in with some lights too, by the way. So we're not just going to put darks in and leave them. I'm going to actually use, I'm manipulating the value range in these trees. As it goes down, it's always going to get darker, always. it works pretty good. I can, as I stood back, this dark can come over further, I see. And there's going to be some nice linear stuff happening in there. Now we're going to go into this tree. I don't have time to sit and fuss. So the top of it looked pretty dark up there. Let's see. I want the same kind of little bitty strokes, so I've got to be careful that I don't repeat myself. It's another mistake that I see sometimes being made is people sit there and they go ding, 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 and pretty soon it starts looking like polka dots. It's like you want to vary the kind of strokes that you put down, which creates interest. Now, the antithesis of that would be something like pointillism, where you want that same kind of mechanical stroke over and over and over again, because what that does is through really optical illusion, it blends everything. And some of the early impressionists, I felt, in my opinion, were a lot like pointillism, except with bigger strokes. I always felt Pizarro was one of those. So I get a lot darker. Now we're going to put some lights in on the trees. It's not always going to stay these simple two values. I mean, you can really, a lot of people really have developed their specific formula for painting trees, and it works, and it also becomes a style if you have a specific formula and it works. It's working okay. So now I'm going to add some lights, and I'll use the same. Actually, I'm going to use a different brush. So I want to keep the darks in that brush. So if I need them again, they're there. So I'm taking another big old number 12. I'm going to take some green and some ochre. Yeah, just look. I'm looking up here because we're getting a little bit more separation. I'm pretty close. I'm going to add some medium to it because I'm laying this paint on very, very wet paint. Let's see what this does. So I got to put a couple strokes in and stand back and look at it. Okay. I am relatively pleased. It's about the right color, right value. And when you get them both, you want to get the value. But when you get the color pretty close on top of it, that's time for celebration. For me, it doesn't always happen. I'm very often satisfied if I just get the value in there. So I bring a little bit of warmth because I'm just beginning to see down in here some of the colors and values on the lights start to warm up. I'm going to go back and add a little bit more green. So it darkened it and brought a little bit more green into it. Working out of the same color. Let's see a little bit down in here. That's probably a little too much. Might want to put some dark back over that. A little bit back in here. A little bit sneaks down in here. Got to stand back. Okay, I'm going to leave it for right now because I think basically it's working. This isn't. So we're going to go into this tree next. The light side of that tree gets even lighter, so I can actually go more like this. And this is that, to answer that question about that, is that light touch. I almost don't even feel the brush touch the canvas.
Do you ever use transparency with paint to help with the illusion of shadows or even red, white? Not in quickies, but yes. The faster I paint, generally, the thicker I paint. Because I'm going for, I'm correcting all the time, and I have to get more opaque. So generally, when I'm doing that, it's more when I'm doing a studio painting, and I might be after a specific look and a specific effect.
And in that case, I would be using, more transparency. And there's a lot of ways of using transparency. One way is just rub stuff out. You don't always have to lay it in. I mean, if it's too dark in the beginning and you can actually take a cloth or a brush and just start saying, okay, I'm going to start rubbing some of the stuff out. And I know many artists that work that way. See, pretty color there too, huh? It's because some of that warm's coming through. Just have fun, man. Really what it comes down to. If it isn't working, fix it. And if that still isn't working, keep fixing it. Or go back a stage. That's something that I kind of learn and I kind of pass on is, geez, it looked good before. I screwed it up. You know what that means? Go back to when it looked good. Not rocket science.
So like scrape it away.
Yep, you can. Let's do it. Good point. Clean knife. Kind of clean. The edges are a little bit, but you can. Watch this. Effects that you cannot get any other way. If you don't like it, go back and go over it again. You can go back and forth as many times as you want. 200, 300, 400 times. No one cares.
You work on the.
It's how it looks when it's done. Keep that in mind. It's not, the development stage is one problem, but when it's done, that's you, and you get to say when it's done. I mean, in these things that I'm doing here, they're done basically at 1:30. So it's like, somebody asked me when you put the highlights on. I said, put the highlights on at 1:15. So, I mean, and I'm being facetious there.
When you are working on the pads, are you mounting them to a panel or a board?
I don't know what you mean. Define the difference between a panel and a board, because I'm not sure.
What do you normally mount them? You mount them to different things.
I mount it almost always to hardboard.
Or the birch.
Not birch as much. No. Birch, I just found I like it because it's lightweight and it's easy to transport. So I usually mount it to. I have mounted it to birch, but most of the time, just plain old hardboard. If you have gator board, great. You just want a nice, firm surface that's going to withstand floods and centuries and stuff like that. Okay, let's do a little bit of drawing back in. So I'm going to take my liner and I'm going to take my nice, I'm going to start with a dark color. And I'm just adding a lot of terp to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to look here. So there's a little, before I do, I just saw something I need to do. I want to put those, but I don't have enough. Where is that? Right there. I don't have enough of the background coming through. Now I do. So now I can actually go through and I can put my little finger down. I usually use my fingernail, or I can use a mole stick. Okay, so we got then we get a little wispy, little tiny things. This is stuff you notice at the end. In order to paint things in the right order, you have to learn how to look for things in the right order and not always feel like, okay, now I need to put it in. Like I just put that in. That's a little heavy-handed. Some of that stuff that I did is a little heavy-handed. So I just take a brush and clean it up. Just kind of soften it back. That's better. And there's one that comes in here. I kind of messed that up already. Now over in here, we got some nice darks. So I'm going to put my hand down here and we're going to pull this one in first. And then we'll put the dark of the trunk. And it's got a couple little other, the base of this trunk actually is bolder. And we got a little pull coming this way, another one there, a little there. There, let's see any other, aha. You start to make it feel a little bit more refined with these, you know, you can overdo it. I wasn't gonna do this, but I think I'm gonna because I kind of like it. There's this little shed back here. So I'm gonna see if what I can do with that. Wasn't in my initial plan, but I noticed it as I was painting it. I said, geez, I kind of like that. Let's see if we can get that in there. That's too heavy-handed. I clean that up, and if I don't like it, I'll take it out. That's the beauty of opaque paint. A little bit more in here. When I scuff that up, I mess the. Sometimes I'll scuff and I'll do it again. I'll do it again. For example, the one thing that we didn't do, got to add some light to those because there's some light pieces of trunk too, because the light is peeking through. So I took white and Naples, and this has got a beautiful white spot right about there. And it's a little bit more of a color in it, but get a little bit of it peeking out up here. Because the light, see what happens is the foliage blocks the sunlight sometimes, so you get these dark and light spots, which actually adds a heck of a lot to the tree. We get this beautiful light one working its way right up, coming from here, working its way up almost to the top. So it goes like this, and then it disappears, and then it reemerges, it disappears, and then we get little spotty areas of it, and then maybe a little piece right at the very top. And if you go too far with it, which I did, we come in and obliterate and put some foliage back over it. Pretty easy to do. Not difficult at all. You put it in, if it doesn't work, you take it out. Same old thing. If you leave it, if it's bad and you leave it, it's wrong. If it's good and you leave it, that's great. So I say, in any painting that you do, it'll only be wrong if you happen to leave it. If you work it out, then you take these things out that don't work, you put the things out in that do. I'm going to step back. So it's still beginning to hold together. But what we need to do is work down in here now. Start to get that going. So the orange that I laid in, it's got a little bit of a light area in the middle of it. So let's kind of put that in there. Let's kind of pop that in. All I did is just took some Naples and mixed it right in with the color I already had mixed on the palette. Okay. So right next to the railroad track, there's a little bit of kind of grassy area, which is right here. And just kind of That looks about right. Messes up that tree a little bit, which is okay. There's a little shrub right there. Another one right there. And we get little pieces of shrubbery every now and then peek working its way up. We get a little bit of light on this, a little bit of light up here on the edge of that. This has definitely got some light on the side. Now, for that railroad track, I'm gonna grab my yardstick here. See how beat up that is? I've got paint all over it. But I want it to be straight and clean and firm. So I am going to use my dark that I have mixed up. The blue, the brown, whatever. If I have a little light mixed into it, I don't care, because I don't care if it's pitch black. I just want it dark. And what we're going to do is we're going to lay this right here. This is right about where I want the railroad track. I'm going to lift it up a little bit. Oh, no, I want it above. I'm sorry. I want it right there. And I'm going to lift it up. I'm going to take this brush, let it skip. If it misses, let it. So now we've got that kind of railroad track line. We get a little bit of that white below, and then there's that wonderful piece of, well, I should say piece. It's kind of some foliage right about in here. It's kind of orange. It's kind of green. That breaks that line. A little darker, maybe a little darker. You don't want to paint the same color everywhere. And it's got wonderful little pieces of brush on this side of the track, overlapping it. Overlapping really helps create kind of believability of some sort of depth in a painting. So whenever you can find a way to use overlapping in your painting, feel free. Use it. Like I said, I don't always say, I don't always say this, by the way, but I say nature basically provides us with things. It's a matter of how we use it as a painter. You use it wherever you can, relatively verbatim, and you alter it when you think you have to for the sake of design. Right about it. I don't like, that's right under that bush, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put it right here. I got a nice darker shrub right there. A few little, and then some greener, and then some lighter green. Mix it up. It's really how it is. It's not one specific way. So we're getting kind of the feeling. Now, I'd love to be able to go back into the mountains. I've got almost 10 minutes, so I probably could. But before I do that, I'm going to take the very bottom brown kind of area. Yeah. I just had to double check and make sure it was the color I just said. It's about in here. So what we're going to do, and it doesn't matter if it's, I just want to overlap what I just put in there. I lightened it up a little more than I need to, so I just take a little bit more brown. Go back over it. The activity helped. Activity meaning, now, several strokes. The one thing I'm missing in that brush right in here is some ochres. So if I can add some, I grabbed it in the brush, but it's so stiff, it's not laying on top. Doesn't matter. Okay.
Carol was asking if you could talk about your color decisions as you change colors from your reference.
Well, I do change colors from my reference, and some of it's intentional and some of it's not. Like I said, I look for value is the key. So some of the colors that I change for the sake of the design or intensity. Like if you recall, if you've watched me do these others, I think about 3 weeks back, I did a really intense painting, in which case I exaggerated all the colors. I'm being pretty true to the piece right here. As true as I can be with the amount of time that I'm giving it. Now I'm making some of these shadows a little bit more blue, and I have to be careful because if I go too blue, I've got to bring enough. I didn't realize I had so much white in it. I'm trying to keep enough alizarin in it so the blue doesn't come off too powerful, but it will add a little bit of. I think of color in general as seasoning. So I say that I was going to use the word flavor. It adds a flavor to it. And I will build color. I will intensify generally as I go along. I will start probably a little bit more muted than it may appear, and eventually intensify those colors to the point where I think they work. But I don't want to start too intense. So with regard to my color choices, that last statement is probably the most important. I don't want to start too intense. I want to have the opportunity to push it that far if I so desire. But if I start too intense, then I've got to go back. So it's better if I'm more muted. I learned that basically from working on a super limited palette, like a 4-color palette. The Anders Zorn is probably the one that's most well known for that. But the Zorn palette is like a 4-color palette, and you realize that you don't need a lot of color. It's color relationships. And I had a teacher that used to talk about color relationships. For example, Don Putman. But the example of color relationships is to make a color look more. You want to make a red look more red. Put green around it. Okay. For example, very often, if I'm painting a green field, a big field of green, I like to lay a warm, like a burnt umber type of a burnt sienna type of a wash down, so that when I paint my greens, just a little bit of green all of a sudden looks really green because of the relationship of that warm color. So colors generally are more about relationships than they are about colors, unless you're doing something like I did like a couple of weeks ago, where it was the whole intent. Before I started painting, I mentioned that my intent was to be very exaggerated. So if you want to exaggerate, that's different. Then stay true to your exaggeration. This is not exaggerated at all. This is pretty safe. What's the word? Pretty pedestrian. It's not real daring in terms of color. It's very, the word naturalistic comes to mind. There was an instructor when I used to teach at Art Center, and Laurie Madden, who used to use that word, naturalistic, in relationship to realism. Realism can be naturalistic, it can be exaggerated. A good example of exaggeration would be somebody like Maxfield Parrish, the great illustrator, painter, who exaggerated, particularly his mountains and everything. So exaggeration is something you have to make that decision. Do you want to exaggerate? Do you not want to exaggerate? You do? Have at it, man. Cut loose. But stay true to it throughout your entire painting. But the key will always be the value. The key will always be the value, not the color. So keep that in mind. That's why I've used the phrase, I didn't come up with it, someone else came up with it, that value does the work and color gets the credit. And there's absolutely just a load of truth in that. Because value is why you look at it, you understand it. Color is something that adds, like I said, it's like cooking. Color adds seasoning.
Mitchell would like to know if there's any concern over the mountaintops looking similar. There are similar in the photo, so the 3 mounds in the center look very much alike.
These two look a little alike. I hadn't looked at it. I might. Is that a concern of mine? It might be. It might be. At present, no. It does kind of what I want it to. These two tend to look a little similar as I do here. That doesn't bother me at all. And that's it. It might bother you. And I don't mean you personally, but it might bother someone who looks at it. And that's one artist's opinion as opposed to another. So these are all considerations that we all have to make all the time. I just wanted the activity of the mountains. I liked this activity, and then I like the extreme activity here and the dark punctuation with a little bit of the stridation. Now, someone like Maynard Dixon would have a field day with this, but he paints in a very stylized, beautiful, stylized with wonderful color kind of feeling, and that's something that is, when you look at it, you say, okay, I know that was his intent. He wasn't trying to paint a super realistic mountain. He was painting his own version of stylization. So that's just something you have to come up with. I don't consider myself a stylizer. I probably do some without even knowing it, but I don't consider myself that. I like the rolling hills. If you guys have ever been over here, we lived in Southern California for a long time, and these hills eventually lead back towards Simi Valley and Thousand Oaks and Moore Park and a lot of areas back in there. So it's kind of trying to get enough breakup of space. There's also a dark ridge that kind of divides this from that. And it's right about in here. And then it's light on the other side. So you just pick up your light. Like I said, you use what nature offers you. If you want to change the mountains to look a little different, you can do that. If you want to keep them, pretty much, you can do that. There's no real rhyme or reason. It's just, it's opinion. A lot of art is specifically opinion. Now I'm taking pure white and I'm mixing it into this color. So I can really pronounce the cloud versus the sky a little bit more than it is right now. It's white. I probably have another color mixed into it. Yeah, I do. I have a little ochre or something. So kind of get that. And then we'll just clean my brush. Go down on it and go across. That's how you soften. You go one way and the other. I brighten it up a little bit too. Now, one of the things I like to do very often when I'm painting longer, I'm going to do a little bit of it here. I have a couple minutes left. I took a little red and a little white, and I'm going to add a little warmth back in that sky. because I hate for sometimes sky to be just one color. So just a little bit. And it's a matter of value mixing. Literally, where I picked that, where I would love to say I invented this whole concept of pulling this. I didn't. I'm really not sure who did, but where I first really noticed it was in the work of Edgar Payne, who does what I call a variegated sky, meaning the sky is not blue. It's not. He'll have all kinds of interesting colors in it, and if the values hold together, it'll work. That pink holds right now, so it tends to work. So. And you could do that with anything. I could do that with these mountains. You could go back, and that's a time thing, you guys. It's just a matter, if you have the time, you can go back and do all kinds of stuff. And just manipulate until you're happy. You know, these paintings that I do in these Friday sessions they're all time frame. And they're more about thinking and a little bit about brush handling than they are about refinement, because they never get that refined. They generally have a lot more of a spontaneity to them, which is fine. I generally paint that way anyway. Even when I paint a studio painting, I just slow down a little bit, don't make as many, make my decisions a little more carefully, which I think is pretty normal. So I'm not as sometimes I was thinking to myself, sometimes it's bad that I'm not as carefree, because sometimes it's better if you find out, if you just kind of trust yourself and go, and then evaluate. You know, every form of painting, every form, I believe, is a matter of conviction, meaning I'm going for it. Action, which is what you do, is the follow-up of your conviction. The action is the actual painting, beginning of the painting. Then evaluation, correction, if necessary, and then a continuation. And you just repeat that over and over and over. You don't, I mean, I assume that most painters that I've at least talked to go through that evaluation process constantly. It's not, you don't just paint and it's done. You paint, evaluate, whoops, messed that up, got to do it again. Whoops, got to add more of this, add more of that. That's just part of art. It's the fun part. Don't let it get you down, man. Have fun. Do it. Doesn't come out, fix it. Still doesn't come out, fix it. Get on to another painting, go back to that painting when you feel like you're ready to try and fix it. But if it's frustrating the heck out of you, don't mess with it. All paintings, every artist goes through that frustration. Every artist. You know what? Every artist I've ever talked to, I should clarify that. I don't know of any artist that just does work and they feel, it's great.
Do you have any tips on winter painting with snow?
Yeah, let's do one, because it's almost Christmas. And I thought about that before I started this. I thought, I need to do a snow, even though unfortunately I've got to do it from, I have painted in the snow up on the Truckee River. But I'll see if I can find some of my snow reference that I show. By the way, you guys may or may not know this. I probably haven't talked about it enough. I only work from my own reference. And the only time I haven't done that is on a series that I'm doing of singers from the 50s, because I wasn't able to go see Nat King Cole and take photos and things like that. So that and commissions, if people give me a commission and they want me to do something, then that's different. Generally, but for my own paintings, I only work from my reference. So if I can find a good piece of reference that I've shot, which I probably have some somewhere, then we'll try and do a snow scene. I think I might have done one. I've done a couple. The key in snow scenes is keeping the don't get the snow looking too flat. Don't get it too cold. If there's sunlight on, there's two different kinds of snow. There's snow that has sunlight on it, snow that is just completely overcast, where you have no sunlight on it. So, it depends on what kind of snow we're painting. Sunlight's probably the most fun, but you can do some really super moody pieces of just what do you call it? Snow scenes, adding a little bit of nuance back in this mid-ground hill. That bothers me up close. I like it from a distance. I don't like it up close. Feels too striped. But we're pretty well done. I'm going to call it quits. If I want to do a touch-up or two, I may do a touch-up later. But for right now, I'm done. Sorry we missed last week, but it was Thanksgiving and we wanted to have fun with our grandson, which we did. But we'll be working the next couple of weeks for sure. Probably not the day before Christmas Eve, because no one's going to want to watch me paint. I mean, I might have two people. In any event, have fun, paint well, work hard, and anything else I can say, I'll say next week. See you then. Bye-bye.